My NS experience, I must say that during my days, there was no such thing as internet, and we didn't have too many friends and relatives that could tell us many things about NS.
And your urine also carry from building to building.
Then the medic was like, no, the other hand. Then he took this and he did this.
Oh my god, this is real. I'm here. It feels harsh, but in hindsight, all these stories and all these experiences really kind of like unite and kind of craft who we become.
There was something that was not exactly satisfactory from our perspective. This almost sounds like a caste system, you know. It's like after BMT, there's this black box that suddenly appears. Okay, Thomas, you go military police. Chun, you go
Correct.
infantry. Actually, when people now appeal to up PES or down PES, 3 of them out of 4 wants to up PES.
Everywhere I hear is like, hey, how to talking? So I was like, 3 or 4? Sure not.
I'm sure many young men still view it as some sort of obligation or like a little bit of a disruption. I'm sorry, I sound like I'm rage baiting you. I'm not.
Hey, sorry boss, this is live. You all better get along, and you all better know how to get along with one another.
Turned out.
Hello everyone, welcome to episode 2 of Turn Out. This is where we talk about all things defense. And today with me, we have...
Hi, I'm Tanisha. Thanks, Minister. It's been a while. In our previous episode, we talked about total defense, but today we're going to be talking about something that's very near and dear to many Singaporeans' hearts, national service.
Okay.
So I didn't do national service.
But
I
family
do.
members did.
Yes, I do have a brother who did. But I want to bring in a special guest to share about his experience. He's a content creator and an esports SEA Games silver medalist, Thomas K. Welcome to the show.
Hello, thanks for having me. Yeah.
So, as you know, Minister, we recently invited your followers to send in their questions about NS on your Instagram. And we received a lot of questions and perspectives from the public. So we'll kind of be weaving that into the discussion today. Okay, Minister, let's start with you. Some people might know of your background as a former army chief, but everyone begins by enlisting as an NSF. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your NS experience?
My NS experience, I must say that during my days, there was no such thing as internet, and we didn't have too many friends and relatives that could tell us many things about NS. So my first impression was turning up at the old CMPB at Dempsey Road to do my medical checkup. And then you have to go through many buildings. It's not like what we have now, whereby you go into one place and then you go from one room to the next. In the past, you actually went from building to building to have different stations. So trying to navigate that, I thought it was part of the IQ test to try and figure out how to get through all this.
Then your urine also carry from building to building.
No, urine, I think they make you do, and then they quickly take it away from you just in case you do anything strange to it. But there was one particular episode that was quite funny, and I thought that I wasn't sure why that guy was doing this, We were all queuing up. There's a long queue. Again, unlike now, whereby you get through the whole thing in just 2 hours or so. In the past, it took quite a long time. So in front of us, there was this eye checkup. So, there's this card that you hold, and you're supposed to cover one eye, and then you go and stretch out your hand, and then I think they were trying to see where your eye focus, right? So all of us were looking at the people in front doing, right? So I thought it was quite straightforward, right? Then came to the person before me, So he covered up his eyes. Then the doctor or the medic told him, hey, stretch out your hand. So instead of doing this, which everyone before him did this, he did this.
I would have done that too.
Then the medic was like, no, the other hand. Then he took this and he did this. Then the rest of us behind were trying not to laugh. We were like, friend, are you trying too hard to convince us of something?
Oh no!
That was most memorable for me, as a young, not even recruit. Then I was like, why is it that?
What's going on?
What's going on, man? But then, of course, after all that, on the actual day itself, that was also quite memorable, because in the past, unlike nowadays where you just go to Tekong and then you just make your way there, and then they pick you up from Pasir Ris and so forth. In the past, we will all go to CMPB, and then you will load up what we call the 3-tonner, the trucks there. And then they will, on the first day, they will bring you around the whole island to collect your barang-barang. And by the time you actually reach BMT in Tekong, it was already at night.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So that was, in the past, it wasn't like you got this duffel bag and everything sorted out for you. We actually went through all the bases to collect our boots, our uniform. So quite a different experience then.
Okay. I love Minister's stories. They're always so interesting and exciting.
I was like, this is how common sense not that common one. Yeah.
But Thomas, how about you? You finished your NS about 10 years ago?
Yes, so I think I ORD'd in 2018,
Okay.
if I still remember.
How was your experience?
I mean, okay, Minister didn't go through like his full story, right? So I'm gonna try to keep mine concise as well. But since you mentioned like the whole BMT moment, I think it reminded me also when I first went to BMT and we got picked up from Pasir Ris and then go into Tekong, and then first thing is you go into a hall and then they lay out your the fuel pack and all this kind of thing and make sure everything's in there. That was the very moment that I was like, oh my God, this is real. I'm here. And immediately that kind of like hierarchy system comes into place of like, there's a sergeant. If I don't listen, something might happen. That kind of fear comes in. And then this regimentation slowly comes into place. And then that 2 weeks of being in there, kind of adapting to that first, that was definitely tough. I think a lot of people would feel that also. For me, I kept a journal. So for the first few days, I'll write down things like how I feel and stuff like that. And then if I got ideas, back then I was already making YouTube content. So when I had ideas, I'll just write things down so that the moment I book out, I know I can go and film these things. So I never felt like my mind had to stop working outside, even though I was part of, NS. I still have to serve. And so for me it was, BMT. After that, I went to SCS for infantry, pro term, a foundation term, pro term. So Pasir Lava, quite nearby, very fond memories there. And then went to Thailand for our exercise. So that's like, it was 3 weeks in Thailand where very hot, of course.
Holiday.
I guess, sure. We can call it that. You lose a lot of weight for sure.
Oh, okay.
And then after that, I returned to BMTC to be a trainer there. But what was even more interesting was I was actually moved to the HQ to do kind of like, well, you would call it administrative work, but I was under the head of manpower. So I got to see a very different side of NS as well. So as much as I was in the jungle and things like that, I also got to see the planning side. I was part of like the commander meetings to be taking notes and things like that. And you could see, as in it's classified, so I cannot share, but you could see a lot of the different kind of developments that go on behind the scenes also, things that they were developing, which now we actually get to see like this exoskeleton ILBVs and things like that, which, I got to see way before how much money needs to get invested to that to create such a technology. And then on the last few weeks, I even got to be part of like a media team to go and film like a opening ceremony video for AARM, the annual ASEAN Rifle Meet. So I got to see all these different aspects of NS. So I think the perspective of what I have for my NS experience was like super holistic. I think to sum it up is really when you're in it, it feels harsh. But in hindsight, all these stories and all these experiences really kind of like unite and kind of craft who we become pushing forward. So yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, everyone's experience in NS is very different, right? But one thing that is the same is the medical classification process. I kind of want to talk a little bit about that. As we all know, the medical classification system has been refreshed. So pre-enlistees undergoing medical screening from end June this year will no longer receive PES grades. And Minister, I just wanted to know why was there a need to refresh the system?
Actually, we have been thinking about this issue for quite a long while, even before the most recent announcement about the revision. There was something that was not exactly satisfactory from our perspective, even when I was a junior commander. The first thing was that we inherited this system of, what Thomas talked about, the structure, right, from the UK. They had the officer system and the NCO system. NCO was non-commissioned officer system. And then we evolved the non-commissioned system into what I call the specialist system. But there was something that was not very satisfactory from two aspects. One was that when people do a test or they got their abilities assessed right at the beginning, and it seems to determine the rest of their entire NS career, not just NSF, but also their NS man career. So if you like, some of the old NS men were saying that this almost sounds like a caste system, that you got it determined and then stays with you for the rest of your life. Now, that wasn't very satisfactory because we asked ourselves, people change, people learn new skills, people acquire new leadership abilities. Why can't people move across different systems and allow them to contribute as much as they can and as much as they want? Why is it that we typecast people into this? And the other one related to this was the medical system, which is that we see sometimes people get injured, but people recover. But then because they got injured once, and then they were never allowed to contribute as much. And the most striking thing was that sometimes you have national sportsmen. They are actually very fit. They're fitter than many of us. But because of one old previous injury, then they can't do many of the things that they wanted to do. Or another aspect is that sometimes people have some allergies when they were young. And because of that, they get typecast into a certain vocation and they can't do more than that. So these are the two things that have bothered us for a long while of how we can maximize and optimize the contributions of our NSF and NS men. So that at different stages of their life, they can do their best for themselves, for their country, rather than to typecast them into one. So for the first one, that's why from the officers scheme and the NCO scheme, we have gone from the officers, the specialists, and the military domain expert scheme or the MDES scheme. That allows people to move across porously. So you could start off maybe in the non-officer or the specialist scheme, but as you acquire your new skills throughout your civilian career, you can be emplaced onto the MDES scheme, and that allows you to maximize your contribution. So for example, in some of the cyber skills or even in the media skills that Thomas will be familiar with, or many other things, that people become lawyers, doctors, and whatever other vocations they are, they can contribute more.
I'm going to relate back to myself. Imagine if I'm entering NS here, right? Because what was most interesting to me about this new medical system is there a chance for me to express interest and to go into a vocation that I actually feel like I like?
Yeah, in fact, that has already changed a couple of years back. That's why I say there are quite a few steps, right? Revamping the officer NCO core into the officer specialist and MDES core. Then a few years back, remember, we allow people to express interest in their vocation, so they rank order. So my time, I think, was quite different. Nobody asked me, where do you want to be? Where do you want to go? It's like after BMT, there's this black box that suddenly appear. Okay, Thomas, you go military police. Chun Singh, you go
correct.
infantry. And there's nobody ever asked us, no? So they just thought, okay, maybe you look like you can do this. But now actually we want a better matching between what people can do and also what they are interested to do. Because I think it's very important to give our NSF and NS men a sense of ownership. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that every 3 months I change my mind, that I go and change vocation. It doesn't happen like that, right? But at least they put some thought to it. For example, now in a BMT, they ask people, would you like to be considered for command appointment? In the past, I think nobody asked us that. So,
mine have.
Yeah,
so mine started after our sit test.
Yes.
So after BMT, like there's this
test.
last test that we go through, right? Where you're put into various kind of situations. After you finish that, they give you a form and they ask you, do you want to be a specialist? Do you want to be an officer? Okay. Which one are you open to?
Okay.
Yes.
I actually didn't take officer because I heard about Brunei and that sounded beyond me.
Yeah.
So I actually only take specialist. So there is this degree of like express where you want to perform at and to what degree, right? Yeah. The other one that I didn't have would be vocation, for example. Yes. I think maybe there is one liner, but I can't really remember. But so I never felt like you had control over that.
Yeah, so now I think it doesn't mean that you always get your choice, but at least you rank order your choice. So like for example, nowadays I think the definition of what is called combat fit is also quite different. Right. In the past, combat fit is all about physical fitness. Mm-hmm. But in today's world, actually, I always jokingly say that, do you know in today's the SAF, out of the 4 services, which one are always at the front line? Almost on their toes every minute, every day. Actually, it's the DIS, no? And the DIS people, if you use a previous conception of combat fit, looking at just muscular, skeletal thing, you may not actually find the correct people. For example, in the past, if you are flat foot, you'll be considered non-combat fit, Mm-hmm. Then it's like, okay, you may not be combat fit for the infantry, the guards, and the commandos in the traditional sense, but that doesn't mean people with flat foot can't do anything. Some of them might be some computer geek that can do many times better than even the so-called combat fit person. So I think we want to shift this concept from combat fit to what we call, are you operationally fit for certain vocations? Mm-hmm. So the concept is that you are operationally suitable, fit for certain vocations, rather than this one size fit all combat fit and non-combat fit. Then it's very binary, right?
Yeah.
Because I'm quite sure if Singapore is attacked, I don't think people will start thinking like, oh, I'm not combat fit, I can't do anything. I think all of us will start thinking, okay, even if whatever you classify me, what can I do for the defense of my country? And that's the concept I think we want. And I think that's a powerful concept that we keep hearing from our NSF and NS men. What's cheered me a lot is that, really during my time, maybe there was this concept, those were the early years where people said, let me try to do the minimum in my NSF days. Whereas now, and maybe there was a story why the guy was trying so hard to convince us that he was he doesn't understand instructions or what, But I think now we see this shift whereby people say that, okay, since I'm going to spend 2 years here regardless, right? Yeah. What can I get out of these 2 years and how can I make the best of these 2 years for me to either acquire some skills or if nothing else, actually just to prove to myself that I can get this thing done.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very important shift. That's why recently when I asked for the statistics, I asked, actually when people now appeal to up PES or down PES, what are the numbers? And I was pleasantly surprised that out of every 4 people who asked to review their PES status, 3 of them out of 4 wants to up PES. It's not the other way around. No. In the past, it was the other way around.
Yeah.
No, I was shocked.
That's quite
I saw this
Yeah.
and I don't believe lah.
Yeah.
I don't know where we get, because mine also, don't say your time, mine also is, everywhere I hear is like, hey, how to talking?
Yeah.
those are
You know,
story
that's
times
the,
as
yeah.
well,
So I was like, 3 or 4?
Yeah.
Sure not.
So I also asked about that, so I was like, you sure or not? You got the numbers correct?
Yeah.
Then I realized that maybe there's also a bit of a cultural shift over time. Because the term that Thomas said just now, this word Chao, Geng, I think amongst all the guys, you don't want this to be said about you, especially in front of your girlfriends or your employers. Because over time, as we have more and more NS men in the civilian world, right? Sometimes these type of things come out, people ask you, hey, tell me about your NS experience. What do you do? And I think generally people find that they take a lot of pride to tell you, oh, I've done this, I've done that. That's why, that's what Thomas was saying, that, oh, I've been to Brunei, I've been to Thailand, I've been to... But if you go and tell people that, I tried to do the lease, then everybody will look at you like,
Lame.
it's like, what kind of attitude you are? So I think there's a slight shift and a gradual shift over time over this culture. I don't know how Thomas, amongst your friends, you think?
Yeah, I kind of agree there, because when it becomes this shared experience and shared culture, for at least, especially the guys, is if you're in an interview, I mean, even me, I've interviewed people before, there's this little bit of percentage which I look at that. You were a sergeant, means you're probably acquired certain skills to manage. You're an officer, even more so. So there's these slight, you do take pride in whatever your role was during that, and then you supplement that with other skills that you've picked up along the way. I think the other really cool part is why this vocation thing to me was, I think, very impactful for the next gen is, I think we're in a generation where people want a lot of purpose in whatever they do, right? It's like, I want to, if I must serve these 2 years, I should take away something from me, or I want to do something that I care about, which is why some people might want to go, infantry, some people might want to be a police. I myself, I wanted to be a police, to be honest, because I felt like I could be very on the ground and I could help people. That was my mindset.
Right.
Infantry has its own set of things that I learned, of course. So it's like, it gives a lot of purpose back.
But I'm sure many young men still view it as some sort of obligation or a little bit of a disruption. I mean, when I looked at my male friends going to NS, I was probably I was partying and I was traveling, but they were like, oh yeah, I have to book in.
Yeah.
Was there some sort of dread or resentment that you had to do it? Sorry, I sound like I'm rage baiting you. I'm not.
Oh, versus, as in compared to
versus,
peers who didn't?
Yeah. Female, especially female, your female
Right.
peers who didn't have to.
Maybe I can start off here. I personally felt like this was something that we had to do, right? So I never compared to, let's say, females which, they're going off to uni and stuff like that already. And in fact, for myself, I was 1 year late because I changed courses. So I was one year later than even people of my friends of the same year, right? So it was a lot of just okay, this is my journey that I have to take. And those 2 years, it's how can I make the most out of these 2 years when I'm inside, right? What are the skill sets that I can take away from it? And there's a lot of, I think, nuanced things that you take away from it. People just think it's about the punishments, it's about you go into a jungle, you fight, or, and then there's all these mindsets of but how big is our army anyways, all this kind of thing. But I think beyond that, it's, I'm going to sound a little bit patriotic here, right? But it's I think this 2 years basically unites a lot of us. We have the same shared experiences, right? I mean, maybe girlfriends don't want to be listening to these conversations all the time, but for guys, it's very fun to listen on how his exercise was, how his NAVEX was, and things like that. And the kind of values, one thing that I would share on top of, all the, I was in commander meetings, all these kind of things, was I actually got way closer to my mom because of NS, right? Because I wasn't very close to my mom growing up. I had my own thoughts and I was that kind of kid, and she wasn't around too much. But through NS, I saw one guy in my bunk, right, who every night called his mom. And then I asked him during one of the route marches, route march, nothing to talk about. You have a lot of time to talk about things. So I asked him dude, how do you have such a close relationship to your mom, and then you can share everything and you call every night? I want to reach there, right? I'm envious. And then he said every night I just call her and it's literally 2 minutes. I just tell her, hello, are you okay? Good. That's it. And that's all it takes. And I was like, wow. Actually, it sounds that simple. And when I went back, I started telling my mom, like, hey, let's take 10 minutes, like sit down on this couch and talk. We might not have the whole day, but that helped to build up our relationship. So it's like, this has nothing to do with NS and military and nation defense, but the kind of like lessons that you learn here, how you adapt to people around you, and the fact that you're forced to work with these people through NS, right? It's not like I can quit my job, move somewhere else. No, you're obligated there, but you learn to adapt. And all these kind of soft skills, I think, are things that I feel like people should have like a different perspective on how to treat NS. And you might not be in, at least for me, it's like, I might not be in the vocation that I would have wanted to be. Maybe somebody out there also, but how can you make the best of that place? You're there for 2 years.
Right.
You know that kind
what
of thing.
Thomas mentioned reminded me of what one of my commanders said was going through before I even became a regular, I was in NSF, as an NSF in BMT and OCS. Commander said something which until today I remember, which is that what you get out of NS is what you put in. Because he says that, NS is not a bed of roses. We are not here to create a perfect set of conditions for you. It's quite different from school. Here you get to meet very nice people, you get to meet nasty people. Hey, sorry boss, this is life. You all better get along, and you all better know how to get along with one another. I always remember that lesson because it's true. I mean, in life, even now in the civilian world, we sometimes meet nice people, sometimes we meet not so nice people, but we all learn to figure out how to deal with nice people and not so nice people and still get the job done.
Yeah.
And I thought these are the, if you like, whether we call it soft skill or life skills, these are important things which are not always expressed in the context of a national service.
Yeah.
And the other thing that after many years I looked at it, I looked back, like, during COVID or some of the crises, right? When there's something to be done, somehow there is a common lingo when people talk about, okay, let's go and get this done. So there's a certain mission focus and yet a certain lingo about how to think about an issue. I remember during the COVID incident when people talk about contingency plan and things like that. So some of the ladies were saying, like, why do you use all this funny lingo, right? Then I realized, all these guys, they probably serve the NS and there's a certain way which they go about solving problems, right? Because they have learned to work as a team, and then they have learned to think of not just doing the here and now, but also think of all the possible contingencies. So I think these are just examples of some of the life skills that we picked up subconsciously. And that is, I think, the value of the NS.
Actually, how much is recruit pay now?
So in the past, I was saying that, my runner, it was quite a sad case. He needed to go and sell illegal VCD, right? But he was very loyal. So he told me this, and I always remember this story. So the rules may say certain things, but beyond the rules, we try and take care of one another.
Do you think that there could come a day where women will be required to enlist?
Maybe I'm a bit more conventional as a guy to say, like, I would rather my girlfriend sit at home and shake leg while I fight in the jungle.
In the case of an attack, I don't want to be waiting for a man to save me. I want to actively do something.
And today, there's no such thing as front line and back line. If Singapore is ever attacked, we are all on the line. right.
There are so many female gamers now.
Yeah.
They sure can fire a weapon one.
Yeah.
I see how they fire in game.
Yeah. This is my formal announcement that I will be doing the women's boot camp.
Yeah.
Yay!
Turned out.